the beta dicarbonyl that we had, and it looks just on that last page, looked like this, OET. We have extra acidic now alpha hydrogens along with ethoxide ion. Okay. So right as soon as that ethoxide ion gets kicked out, a very fast acid-base reaction will happen. Remember, these alpha hydrogens between two carbonyls are around pK of 10. Ethoxide came from ethanol, which was pK of 16. So that means ethoxide is a strong enough base. It will instantly deprotonate to make a resonance stabilized enolate. And that's the actual product. Oops, let's write it over here. Product of Claisen. And this last step is actually favorable energetically, right? Even though we don't normally think of making an anionic product as being favorable, ethoxide is a more powerful base than this resonance stabilized enolate. So if we want to, in a separate step, right, step 2, add hydronium. Right? If we do an acidic workup with it in a totally separate step after our Claisen reaction is finished, then we can reprotonate and get a neutral product. Okay? But in order for this reaction to be favorable, we have to do this last step. Okay? This acid-base reaction actually drives this reaction to completion because there's this favorable acid-base thing that happens at the end, and that's sort of a common theme. We saw that way back with acid chlorides, where the HCl reacted later on. So that means that in order for this to be favorable, the nucleophile needed to have at least 2 alpha hydrogens on that carbon. So this one right here came from an acetate, right? This is ethyl acetate, so it had 3 alpha carbons. If we had only had 1 alpha hydrogen, we would, for instance, here, let me draw one for you. This only has 1 alpha hydrogen. So the self-condensation that we could imagine happening would look something like this, okay, where there was the new bond that formed, but this cannot be deprotonated. So I end up with ethoxide ions present right there, and this reaction is not going to be favorable enough. Okay? We'll end up with just starting material right there. Also, we can consider mixed Claisen reactions where I have 2 different reactants. Those can be successful as long as only one compound has alpha hydrogens. So that means that things like ethyl benzoate, like this, with no alpha hydrogens, as well as ethyl formate, right, which is HC double bond O OET. The H is attached directly to the carbonyl. It's not an alpha hydrogen. Those are popular electrophiles for mixed Claisen reactions. So you have this compound in a container along with the base, then you slowly add the compound with alpha hydrogens. Right? So the ones with the alpha hydrogens, that ends up being the nucleophile right there. Let's just write alpha. So we end up with attached to the alpha carbon right there, the accepting ester group, the electrophilic ester group, minus the leaving group. So the one with no alpha hydrogens has the leaving group on it. That'll give us an effective mixed Claisen reaction. Notice the characteristic of the reaction here is that we have two carbonyls that are beta to each other. This reaction down here is interesting. It's technically not a Claisen reaction since it's not the reaction of two esters. This one is technically called Claisen-like. Where we have just a regular ketone enolate. Okay. So for that, we just have a beta keto aldehyde, right? Just it's not an ester, right? Up here, the standard Claisen reaction where we mix two esters together will always give us a beta keto ester. Like that. So if our nucleophile is just a regular old enolate, like we saw in the last chapter, not an ester, we end up with just two carbonyls beta to each other.